Now it's time for Global Insights, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Now, allied leaders of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization will meet at a summit next month amid the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Madrid summit will finalize the allied countries' next strategic concept, taking into account the organization's future ties with Moscow, as well as China's growing influence in Asia, according to NATO. In fact, the transatlantic allies have invited their Asia-Pacific partners, South Korea, Australia, Japan and New Zealand, to join in, as global challenges demand global solutions, as the NATO Secretary-General put it. We're going to discuss what we may see as different alliances come together amid this time of conflict and uncertainty. For this, we're joined by Elizabeth Braw, Senior Fellow of Foreign and Defence Policy at the American Enterprise Institute, and Professor Kim Won-soo, Rector of Global Academy for Future Civilizations at Kyung University in Seoul. Very warm welcome to you both. And to begin with you, Ms. Braw, now, world leaders at the NATO summit in June, they're going to try and finalise their strategic concept. And, well, what do you think this concept is going to entail?
So the strategic concept is essentially NATO's national security strategy. Every country has a national security strategy. NATO has its strategic concept, and it comes out about every 10 years rather. And the last one, in fact, came out more than 10 years ago, and a lot has changed. The annexation of Crimea was, of course, 8 years ago, and NATO's neighborhood has changed radically even since then, now most recently and most importantly with the war in Ukraine. So all of this has to be taken into account in this new strategic concept, and will be taken into the new strategic concept, which has to address a radically changed world compared to what it was in 2010. And that radically changed world, of course, includes China as well. China's increasingly aggressive posture. Now NATO's role is territorial defense. So what China does maybe matters less in this part of the world, in NATO's part of the world, but nevertheless, what China is doing will be on all these leaders' minds.
And Ms. Braw, now, what's making headlines these days is Finland and Sweden joining the Washington Treaty. Now, it seems to be a matter of time rather than a matter of whether they will or not. But what would that actually mean for the Kremlin? I mean, what kind of losses would this mean for them?
It's a huge loss of face for Russia. There has been it's a long-standing tradition that both Sweden and Finland have maintained of remaining outside any military alliance. Of course, it has been, it's no secret to anybody that they cooperate very closely with NATO, but formally they are not part of NATO, and that has cultural background starting in World War II, when Sweden remained neutral, and then in the Cold War it maintained that policy of neutrality. Finland was forced by the Soviet Union to remain neutral during the Cold War, but both countries, even since the end of the Cold War, have had this policy of remaining outside NATO. And now they look very likely to say that that time is over. Now we have to take a position, and we'll take the position of joining NATO. Is really a radical shift, not so much maybe in military terms, but in policy terms. And Russia will stand there embarrassed at having not just failed to invade Ukraine or to conquer Ukraine in the way he wanted, but also having lost these two non-aligned countries in the process, the way it looks like it's heading now.
And now, bringing you into the conversation, Professor Kim, South Korea, along with Japan, Australia and New Zealand, they've been mentioned as potential non-member participants in the summit, as the US has been striving to rally allies and partners to hold Russia accountable for its invasion of Ukraine. Do you think Seoul is going to choose to join the summit once Yoon takes office, and what kind of role do you see it playing?
Yes, as you said, it will be decided by the new government due to take office next week. And personally, and also they already indicated they are considering it. And personally, I would be more surprised if the new government decides not to go for two reasons. Because first, South Korea has been working with NATO for partnership since 2006 as one of the NATO's global partners. Secondly, South Korea already participated in NATO's 40 ministers meeting virtually held last year. So I think it is more likely for South Korea, new government of South Korea to participate in the summit.
And Ms. Ward, what are your thoughts on this? What kind of role do you think these possibly invited countries such as South Korea would be playing at this summit? Do you think they'd be playing a significant role, or is it more symbolic and showing solidarity?
There's a lot of symbolism, but also potentially policy proposals, policy ideas that will be discussed. We should remember that Asia and the Indo-Pacific region are gaining prominence as far as NATO is concerned, as far as the US is concerned, clearly, and we saw that, for example, with AUKUS, the new alliance or a grouping involving the US, the UK, and Australia. We've seen it with the Quad, and the challenge is that NATO is an organization that's set up to counter the Soviet Union or the Warsaw Pact, and it's really the only remaining military alliance, and as a result, it has all these other challenges sort of dumped in its lap, and so it has to try to find some sort of way of handling China, even though China was not one of its original responsibilities. And for that, it will need to, and it's likely to form stronger partnerships with friends and allies in the region. So that's why this the invitation to countries, including South Korea, to be part of this summit goes far beyond symbolism.
And Professor Kim, we seem to be seeing Washington's transatlantic and Indo-Pacific partners working together and jointly tackling Moscow and Beijing. Are we seeing them really merge together? I mean, what does this mean for the world order?
I think for now, it is a more for partnership for cooperation rather than a formal merging, because membership is one thing and partnership is another. But as we previously discussed, there are a lot of common challenges to be shared by NATO and also NATO's Asia-Pacific partners. And we share same values. And there are new challenges emerging, not only along the geographical, geopolitical fault lines now being developed throughout the world, but also we are facing common challenges like cybersecurity and chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear security risks, and also how to counter disinformation. So we have a new challenges and common agenda NATO and Asia-Pacific partners can discuss. But I think it is still too early how that partnership between NATO and Asia-Pacific partners will take shape. So I think it remains to be seen.
And Professor Kim, well, there's speculation that if President-elect, and who will of course be president by that time, Yoon, if he attends the NATO summit in June, then that might actually set the scene for his first in-person encounter with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and possibly a trilateral meeting with President Biden as well. Do you see these sideline sort of run-ins happening?
Yes, I see that possibility coming. If President Yoon decides to go, which is likelier than not going, and then that setting will provide a perfect opportunity for having perhaps trilateral summit between Korea, US, and Japan, and also plus a bilateral summit between Korea and Japan, because the Korea-Japan relationship still remains the weakest link between in the relationship of the U.S. in its Asian allies, Korea and Japan. So Korea-Japan relationship and also new president makes clear that it will be his priority to improve the relationship, and so that we can have a stronger base by rectifying the weaker link in the trilateral relationship in the Asia-Pacific, led by the US.
And Professor Kim, when they do have a three-way summit at some point, what do you think is going to be on the agenda?
A lot. I mean, the security challenges, of course, in the NATO summit context, but also bilateral issues between Korea and Japan. And I think it's long overdue to be rectified because, again, Korea and Japan share same values. And also, I think Korea and Japan share the same interest in keeping the peace and security, keeping the status quo in the Asia-Pacific. So I think Korea and Japan have many more reasons to improve their bilateral relationship sooner rather than later.
And Ms. Broad, now, how do you see the Kremlin reacting to the summit? I mean, they didn't stop shelling when the UN Secretary General visited Ukraine, for instance. Should Western allies brace themselves for an even bigger reaction?
There's no doubt that if Sweden and Finland submit membership applications on the 17th or 18th of May, as they are now extremely likely to do, then Russia, the Kremlin, will react somehow. It would be it would just be extremely unlikely that the Kremlin would say nothing, because this is a huge embarrassment really to Russia and a loss of two non-allied countries in Russia's immediate neighborhood. And it has been interesting to see just in the past couple of days, Russian authorities or a Russian organization has launched an advertisement campaign at Russian bus stops denouncing various famous Swedes, including the author of Pippi Longstocking and the founder of IKEA, denouncing them as Nazis. So you can see where this is going. Russia is trying to discredit Sweden. And why is it trying to discredit Sweden? Because it really, I think, doesn't have the military means to do anything about this NATO likely membership application to NATO. So it's trying to use disinformation and discreditation and other non-military means to weaken Sweden. But Finland and Sweden are prepared. Finland has already been subjected to Russian cyber attacks, increased Russian cyber attacks since it started discussing NATO membership. So we'll see more of that. But as for a military response, Russia is threatening military response and has been threatening that for years. But of course, we know it's completely in over its head in Ukraine and won't have military forces to spend for any sort of aggression against Sweden or Finland or any other NATO member state.
And Ms. Broad, before we go, well, the summit's a month away and honestly, a lot can happen in a month. Do you see any room for diplomacy or any kind of breakthrough that could change the situation? My question to you, Ms. Broad.
Not very much. I'm not hopeful. We have seen even the diplomat most likely to have any sort of success. The UN Secretary General, as you mentioned, went to Kyiv, and when he was there, the Russians shelled Kyiv. So it's very hard to see how diplomacy can have any has much chance of success at the moment. But we should remember that President Erdogan of Turkey, who is often an annoying person, has really taken the lead in negotiating and having some sort of talks between Russia and Ukraine. And I think if anybody can succeed or at least launch some sort of process where they have serious talks, it is him. And NATO is lucky to have Turkey as a member state, even though Turkey is often annoying and Erdogan is often annoying personally. But he is a very useful ally in this situation and has indeed been in other situations as well.
Well, I'm afraid this is all we have time for today. That was Elizabeth Broad, Senior Fellow of Foreign and Defence Policy at the American Enterprise Institute, and Professor Kim Won-soo, Rector of Global Academy for Future Civilizations at Kyung University. Thank you both so much for your insights today.
Thank you so much.